Hi, my name is Kimberly Fitzgerald. I am the city archaeologist here at the city of Salem in Oregon. I'm here to tell you a little bit about our program. So Salem is the capital of Oregon. We're here in the Willamette Valley. We have about 210,000 people and we are growing. We expect about 270,000 people here in the next 20 years. City of Salem became a certified local government in 1986. And for those of you that are familiar with this program, they offer some great grants. And we've been receiving funding since 1986. And in this last year, we received a grant to update our historic preservation plan, which is a component of our comprehensive plan. And we have a component devoted specifically to the protection of archaeological resources in this plan. So Salem has about 250 known archaeological resources in our community. And our program, we've been devoted to educating the public about these resources in our community. We've been doing a couple of pop-up exhibits and public archaeology projects. And we've been working on collaborating with the tribes that have an interest in our community. And we formalized that collaboration earlier this year by establishing a memorandum of understanding with one of these tribes, the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde. And you heard from Brice a little bit earlier. And that partnership has been quite marvelous. We've been working together on identifying and protecting the archaeological resources in our community. So we've also worked hard to establish local code and criteria for the protection of these archaeological resources. And one of the key steps to do that has been developing our historic and cultural resource protection zone map. So we did that again with a collaboration of the State Historic Preservation Office and the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde, as well as the Confederated Tribes of the Silex and the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs. We also have established regular review and consultation meetings where we're discussing projects that are happening within this zone. So in Salem, historic clearance review is required for all public properties that are within this protection zone, as well as for private properties that are receiving public funding. And as you can see on the nice, beautiful flow chart here, our clearance process includes establishing whether or not there's any known archaeological sites in the project area. And even if there's not, we look to see whether there's any potential resources of significance. If the site has some kind of significance and there's a potential of these resources being disturbed by the development, we would like to know that. So we can look at different alternatives for avoiding impact. And then as part of the assessment of this development of the impact on the site, we do either testing or excavation for data recovery or monitoring during the site redevelopment. So I'm going to share with you a case study to show you how our process works in practice. So this is a mixed-use development that came to my attention last year during a pre-application conference. So the first question I had to answer was, is it in our historic and cultural resource zone? And the answer was yes. And I just want to note with this map, this is one I talked about earlier, is that it does not show any known sites, or it doesn't even show the boundaries of our protection zone on the map, because that's prohibited under state law here in Oregon. And I also want to confirm whether or not the property, even though it's privately owned, if they're using public funds or not. And in this particular case, the owner is actually taking advantage of some public funding to help with this project. So the next question I have to answer is whether or not there's a recorded archaeological site here. So to get the answer to that question, you have to be an archaeologist to access this information. It's the ORA database, and that's maintained by the Oregon State Historic Preservation Office. And in this particular case for our project, I found that it, in fact, does not have a known site here. So we're moving ahead with our next question, and that's we want to find out what the history is of the site. So I dove in to do some research, and as I mentioned, the Willamette Valley is a great place to live. It's always been a great place to live. And the earliest residents here were the Santiam Band of the Kalapuya, and they had a village site here known as Chemikiti. And there have been quite a few redevelopment projects that have been happening in the vicinity, and a significant number of pre-contact artifacts associated with the village site, and these people have been found. So there's a high probability that we would probably run across something during the redevelopment of this site as well. I was also pretty excited to learn that this site was the site of Jason Lee's second Methodist mission house. So Jason Lee actually came to the Oregon Territory in 1834, and he built this house here in 1841. This house evolved over the years. It was on this site for over 150 years, I believe, and then when it was getting ready to be redeveloped, preservationists took action, and you can see the pictures on the left side of the screen show the 1841 section of the house being extracted and mobilized, and it was saved and moved across town to the Willamette Heritage Center in 1963, where it's currently located and open to the public. So the next question I need to answer is whether or not development will uncover significant archaeological resources. So to answer that question, we really need to do first some GPR, some non-invasive survey to determine where we're going to put our actual test units, and then we can do some selective testing and excavation, and then hopefully some artifact recovery to help us understand more about the site. So in this particular case, so it's privately owned, and normally the private property owner would be responsible for this step, but because of the unique significance of this site, I reached out to the owner and offered to do a public archaeology project with partners of Willamette University, as well as the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde, among others. And the owner was really excited and agreed to work with us. So we began by doing that GPR and setting up the areas where we were going to test. Well, and then the pandemic happened. So we had to pivot a little bit because of this pandemic. We had to downsize a little bit. We still were able to use 30 volunteers who contributed over 600 hours to the project, but we did have to enact some unique things that I'd never had to do during archaeology before. We had to wear masks and do social distancing, which we were able to do. And we still moved ahead with our public involvement and our public education. We pivoted a bit on that as well. I developed a little handy notebook with pictures of the history of the site, as well as I had a little bag of artifacts that I would share with folks that would drive up. We also did several YouTube videos, which we shared our progress, and had a Facebook Live tour of the site. So this drone shot gives you a nice overview of the site towards the end of our project. We ended up excavating 12 1-by-1 meter units. And you can see the coolest part was we were able to find the basement wall of the Jason Lee house, which was brick, very unique, very cool. We also completed 12 shovel tests at the north end of the site. So all of this, we recovered about 1,500 artifacts, and it helped us to understand the significance of the site and the context. So to wrap up our case study, we were able to provide clearance to the developer to move ahead with their development because we were able to confirm definitively that the most significant area of the site would be in the parking lot. That was where we found the basement. And so there would be no adverse effect to the significant resources on the archaeological site. We're going to continue to work with them by assisting with monitoring as the project moves ahead. It's currently in for building permits. So the one thing that I did want to mention was that we are going to be working with the property owner on interpretation on the site. And we really want to pay special attention to decolonizing the story of this contact period. Most of the history that has been shared about Jason Lee has been from that missionary perspective. So we really want to incorporate the perspective of the Native American community, as well as any other interested stakeholders who really haven't had a voice in telling this story from a different perspective. So we're also going to be working with the Oregon Travel Information Council, who's responsible for these beaver boards. You can see a picture at the center of your screen. There's a beaver board just directly to the south of this site, and we want to update that with a more appropriate interpretation. So these beaver boards were they started to be put up, I believe, in the 1940s all around Oregon, and they are pretty cool, but they do need to be updated. So we're going to be working on that. So I've given you a case study and overview of our program, and I want to leave you with a sense of what you can do at your level with the resources that you have. You can see an archaeologist here. We excavate level by level. So I'm going to give you some recommendations for how you can incorporate archaeology into your program one level at a time. So level 1, you can just start with public education. So with projects kind of like what Amy was describing, you can partner with universities or with your local tribes to share about the cool resources in your community. The tribes in particular, they know the most about that earliest history of the community and people that lived in your area. You can also get support at the council level by adopting a historic preservation plan with a component devoted to archaeology. And then when you're ready, you can move on to the next level. You can get a more formalized relationship with the tribes, doing kind of like what we did with a memorandum of understanding, committing to work together on areas of mutual interest. And then you can get an archaeologist on staff. That's probably the best thing you can do to help build a successful program. If you can't get support to actually have a staff archaeologist, you could invite an archaeologist to be a part of your landmarks commission. Either way, this archaeologist can help you map your resources so that you know what you have. And then the final level, once you know where your resources are and what they are, you can establish a local code to help protect them and connect that code to a protection overlay zone. And then finally, just like many of you have a Historic Landmarks Commission meetings regularly to talk about your above ground resources, you can establish roundtable meetings to talk about your archaeological resources with those folks that have expertise in your community about these kinds of resources. So lastly, I just want to leave you with a mention about education. I think that no matter what level you are at, like the other presenters have talked about today, it's really important to share the information that you have about your archaeological resources. People can't want to protect what they have unless they know about it. So good luck in your future endeavors, and thanks so much for listening. We look forward to answering any questions you have.